Hey, this is Matt Woods again with First Alert 4. There was so much that went into reporting this story and several interviews. One of those was exoneree Darryl Burton. I reached out to Burton because his was another local case that Centurion Ministries took on. Burton now lives in Kansas and runs his own organization called Miracle of Innocence. As he was stopping in town a few months ago, we sat down for an interview. Burton doesn't know Fredrico Lowe-Bey personally, but he advocates for him because he believes in Centurion's mission. He talked about his own struggles in proving his innocence, and it was a really great conversation. A lot of it didn't make it into the podcast, so I'm including the extended interview here. Without further ado, here's Darryl Burton.
Yeah, definitely an advocate for Fredrico Lowe-Bey. Yeah, and a big supporter of his. And I know Centurion, when they take a case, they believe that the person is innocent, just like they took my case and got me out in 2008, so 17 years ago. Yeah, and I was there with Fredrico Lowe, and I was there for 25 years, so he's been there almost 15 years longer. So he's been there almost 40 years. And I believe in his innocence. I know just a little bit about his case, but I never really researched his case or did what you call it.
And so, wait, did you say that you guys were in the same prison together at one point?
Yeah, we were in the same prison together at one point.
Was it the same housing unit? Because I know sometimes they separate units or whatever.
I can't remember if we were in the same housing unit, but I know we was in Jefferson City. We were in Jefferson City prison at Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City for some years at the same time. And then I don't know if I got transferred to another prison or maybe he got transferred to another prison. But when you there for 37 years, you've almost spent time in every prison that Missouri has that's online, especially if they maximum security prison. Just like I was there for 25 years, I served time in about 4 different prisons.
Right.
And so Fredrico probably served time in 5, 6 different prisons. And so, yeah, we're in the same prison at one time.
Mm-hmm. And Centurion took on your case in 2000, if their website's...
In 2000, right. In 2000.
If their website's correct. And then I think they formally took on Fredrico's case. It was like a couple years later.
Yeah.
So not that far apart, but obviously your case, they were able to... I mean, it's if you look at it in one way, it's like 8 years is a long time to be sitting in prison.
Yeah.
After but it takes a lot of time to prove somebody's innocence. So let's just go back to your story in the beginning. Mm-hmm. You got arrested and charged with a guy had been shot and killed at a gas station. There was a lone gunman.
Right.
There were 3 eyewitnesses there who described the guy. Their testimony wasn't heard at trial. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that was somewhat. That's correct. There were 4 people, though, actually.
Okay.
4 people who gave a description, an identification that night, and described the person as a short, medium to light-skinned guy. 3 women and 1 man. They all described the guy as being 5 feet 5, 5 feet 6 inches tall, medium to light skin. They didn't get to testify at trial. I mean, a couple of them did, but they didn't testify as to if it was me. And that was the question that was never asked of those witnesses, even when they testified. Is Darryl the person who committed the crime? I'm not light-skinned,
Right.
I'm very dark-skinned. I'm not short. I'm not 5, 5, 5, 6,
And I believe... didn't they say the person had an afro? I mean, I know this was way back, but did you have an afro?
I had a long Jerry curl. You probably don't remember those. You're kind of young.
That's right. Could you describe it?
Yeah, Jerry curl was, it was, they had curl and relaxers. You put it in your hair. I had a big afro at one time, and then you put the relaxers in your hair, and it curls it up. My hair was down on my shoulders, man. Way back, people looked at me and called me Black Jesus. I mean, not that I'm Jesus by any stretch of imagination.
You're a pastor now, though, right?
I'm associate pastor.
So you lived up to the
I didn't believe in God at the time. I didn't believe in God at the time, Matt. I was not a religious guy, but my hair was down on my shoulders, man. I had a lot of hair. I had a head full of hair, and so a short afro, you don't grow a head full of hair overnight or over a period of even a few weeks or months. It took me a long time to grow my hair. and then putting in that jerry curl. That's what it was called. You can, look that up, but that was the fashion back then. A lot of guys had jerry curls. A lot of the, pop stars, and I even think Michael Jackson kind of had, a jerry curl or relaxer in his hair. But that was the look. And so those were some of the guys what we was trying to emulate when it came to hairstyle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So 4 eyewitnesses give a description of this guy. Obviously, none of them give your name, but the description is not that close to you.
Right.
But there was two supposed eyewitnesses that...
2 snitch witnesses.
2 informants.
Yes.
Yeah, that identified you as the shooter, and then it turned out later that they lied.
Yeah.
They just completely lied.
They were lying. 2 guys who were police informers, you're right, that, they was making deals. One was facing like a robbery charge or something like that, robbery, maybe an assault. And so he was a police informant, and he was on the police payroll. He first said he saw nothing. When he caught the case, then he said he saw something. The police and prosecutor got with him, and they collaborated. He's jailhouse snitch. And he came into court, raised his hand, and he lied. And the other guy also, who I never saw in my life, didn't know this individual, but he was also an informant, police informant, and a snitch, and he was a drug addict. And so they were paid. Both essentially was given money to come and testify, or given some leniency or some kind of benefit in order for them to come and testify and lie on me. So that's what those 2 witnesses. That's the background of them in a nutshell.
And so the 4 eyewitnesses that didn't testify at trial, like when you were charged and at trial, did you know about those people that had given the description?
No, I didn't know about them at first. They were in the police report, but again, a couple of them did come and testify. All of them may have testified at some point. I don't know if it was at the initial trial or later on, but all of them did testify, and they said that the person they saw was a short, medium to light-skinned guy. Every one of them, and they stuck to that description. So, I mean, again, when you look at me, you see a dark man.
You're not light-skinned.
Not at all.
No.
And this is a summertime. In the summertime, like everybody else, I get a tan. I get even darker than what I am now. In the wintertime, my complexion is probably what it looked like now. But in the summertime, man, I'm a really dark guy. And I thank God that I happen to be dark, because that's what helped me get out of prison. It's my dark complexion. No motive with this case, no ballistics, DNA, confession, weapon, fingerprint, nothing connected me to this crime at all, except these guys who was making deals with the prosecutor and the police. That's what's, got me brought into the system. Mm-hmm. And then here's another thing about the case that's so infuriating, is that the judge, the prosecutor, and my defense attorney, which I call affectionately public pretender, they had a sidebar, and they had a conversation about the other suspect who not only fit the description, but he had shot this man on 3 separate occasions. He shot the victim 3 different times. 4th time he shot and killed him, because they were feuding over drug turf. The guy who was killed, these were drug dealers, drug lords, and they were feuding over drug turf. And the judge, the prosecutor, and my lawyer, they agreed not to let the jury hear about that. Well, that's not justice, man. Why would you agree to something like that? And this guy's still out there, and that feud kept going over for some years. That guy got killed a couple of years later. But why would you not let the jury hear about that? They know it was important. That's why they talked about it out of the hearing of everybody in the courtroom. No one knew what they were talking about when they went to the bench. They do that every now and then. And they had this sidebar discussion. It was years later when I found that in the transcript. So, man, they knew about this guy. They knew that. And they kept it from the jury.
And did your public defender try to...
Never try to get that information in. Agreed with the prosecutor and the judge not to let that in. That's what I'm saying. Why would my public defender agree to something like that?
And you said public pretender?
Yeah, that's what I call him, public pretender.
Yeah, what makes you say that?
Because this person pretended to defend me. This person was not defending me. I had also some airline tickets and some alibi that show I was in another state, in Washington State, at the time of the crime.
You were in a completely
different
You were
state.
across the country when this happened?
Yes, absolutely. And this person didn't go get my airline tickets and didn't go get my alibi, which was my best friend. He was in Washington State, living in Washington State, Tacoma, Washington. And I was up there with him. I went up there with him, sometime in May, like late May, right around one of the holidays, I think Memorial Day. Mm-hmm. And I stayed up there for about 30 days. I didn't come back until late June. Well, they said the crime was committed in early June. But the lawyer didn't help me and said, we don't need to prove anything. The state has the burden to prove their case. The defense don't have to prove anything. So, I was a little naive, and I was agreeing with that, but that's not how it works in reality. When you get charged with a crime, you have to prove, that you didn't do it. That's just the reality. And some people say, oh, the state, you're innocent to proven guilty. The state has to prove all the evidence against you. No. You better be able to have something to show that you're not the person who committed the crime. That's what I learned later on.
And this was 1985, if I have that right?
85. I got arrested in 84 and convicted in 85, sent to prison in 85, and stayed there till 2008.
So with all this evidence that is pretty exculpatory on your part during that time, do you think that law enforcement purposely tried to frame you for it because they had these snitches that were telling them, oh, it's this guy, and they just went along with it and tried to prove the case on you? Or do you think they actually thought they had the right guy?
No, they know they had the wrong guy because these guys was shooting at each other and each other's socials. They stayed in the news. These was drug lords, drug dealers, gangbangers, and so, they know what's going on in the community. And not only that, Matt, in the 1980s, and you can do your research on this, 15 of us were convicted wrongfully in the 1980s, all African Americans.
You're talking about St. Louis or Missouri?
St. Louis and St. Louis County, yeah, St. Louis City and St. Louis County. And go and do your research. In the 1980s, we were all convicted wrongfully out of that decade. 15 people, 14 men and 1 woman, which is Ellen Reason I'm going to pick up in a few minutes.
Oh, really?
Yes, but she's an exoneree also. Mm-hmm. We were all convicted in the 80s, man. So that's not a mistake by 2 prosecutors, 2 district attorneys, George Peach and George Westfall. That's not a coincidence when you got all of these convictions in the same decade, So, and each one of us on average did about 15 to 20 years. So, Matt, you can't you can't say that this was just okay. Well, we made a mistake, or okay, we may have gotten the wrong guy. Mm-hmm. No, it was something systemic. It was systematic. That's the way they was arresting people of color and who were poor, couldn't afford attorneys, and we all got convicted in the same decade. That's not a coincidence. 1 or 2 maybe, but when you got 15 people, or maybe more than that, 15 who were actually proven innocent later on, many years later.
Mm-hmm. How did you go about trying to prove your innocence after you got convicted of this murder?
I began to work on my case as what's called a pro se litigator, jailhouse lawyer, to say it affectionately. And I did legal research. I started writing motions and pleadings and briefs because I said to the judge after they brought me over for sentencing, I said, Your Honor, this court, all of you framing me. I'm an innocent man, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm going to fight this case till I prove that I'm innocent. And the judge, didn't like to hear that. So, well, you blame the jury because I didn't find you guilty and no one else did. The jury found you guilty. I said, but they wrong, and you letting them do it. That's what I said to the judge. Paraphrasing something along those lines. Mm-hmm. But I wrote motions, pleadings, briefs. I did everything I could. I learned a little bit about the law, took courses in computers and the law and paralegal. I was fighting for my life. And then I started writing letters, hundreds and hundreds of letters, man. I wrote hundreds of letters from the United States to Canada to Europe, presidents, governors, senators, representatives, Oprah Winfrey, sports figures, you name it. I wrote them. Religious people, and I was not a religious guy. And then I wrote a letter to Jesus, actually not believing in him, and said, if you're real, you help me get out of this place, I'll serve you and tell the world about you. That's what I said.
What address did you send that one to?
I didn't have a mailing address, and so I put it under my mattress for a couple of days and got rid of it. Had the guards found that letter, they say, hey, this guy's going nuts. He's losing it. He's writing letters to Jesus God. He don't even believe in God.
Because sometimes they check the letters going out, right?
Well, I didn't have a place to send it, but they check your cell. They come in and do what's called a cell search, random cell search. And they come in and they check your cell, and then sometimes, they'll see you got letters and different things, and if they had looked at the letters, say, this guy seemed like he's losing it. And if they think you're losing it, then, they would perhaps put you in a nut ward,
Gotcha.
So, but to go out on the yard and get into a fight and get into a knife fight, that's normal for that place. Writing letters to God, it's not normal.
Did anybody respond to your letters?
Yeah, some people did. I wrote this station. I wrote news stations. You name it. Some of them responded. Some of them said, well, you need a lawyer. Well, that's a no-brainer. I can't afford one. Some of them would say things like, well, that's not, nothing that we get involved in, and we wish you the best. Good luck. Things like that. But no one said anything about helping me until Centurion. When I saw Centurion on television on 60 Minutes in 1990, and I wrote them. They were helping a lady get out of a Texas prison. She had served time for a crime she didn't commit, about 9 years, and I saw them helping her in 1990. I wrote them and said, look, I'm innocent too, help me. And they wrote me back and said, basically, yes, we help innocent people, but man, we so backlogged. We're a small organization based out of Princeton, New Jersey. They said, it'll be 10 years before we get to your case. And this was in 1990. I had 75 years without parole. Basically, I said, well, I'm going to write you for 10 years. And I did. They took my case in 2000, 10 years later, and they got me out 8 years after that. So that was 18 years from the first letter that I wrote to that organization.
And the process, so you write them, they say, man, we're backlogged. It's going to take us a decade. And the process, did somebody come out and interview you, and then did they like research your case to decide whether they have something to go off of, or kind of how did that process work out before I actually
took the case?
Yeah, before Centurion decided to really take on the case. Yeah.
Here's what I learned later is that all the time that I was writing them, they would ask me to fill out a questionnaire. I fill out the questionnaire. Then they asked me to write a 10, 12-page summary of why I was innocent. And so they asked me to do that. Said, tell us all the reason why you say you're innocent. And I wrote that out for about 10 or 12 pages. Like I said, I've been writing a lot of letters anyway, so writing was, not hard for me to do. But all the time I was communicating with one of their case developers, volunteers. They were doing research on my case, but I didn't know that. They was verifying things that I was saying, and they was going to verify, as I heard some politician or famous person say, trust but verify.
That's a saying in this business, too, yeah.
Good.
You're right. That is good, right?
That's a good saying, yes.
Yeah.
Trust but verify. And so that's what they was doing. They was following up with leads, and they was, and then they write me again, but they were never telling me that they was doing these, these little investigations or research or verifying things. I didn't know, but I knew I was innocent. In fact, I think I had told them, look, you don't have to prove that I'm innocent. Go and prove that I did this here. Go and prove that I'm guilty. If you think that, they got the right man, well, go and establish that. Go and look for the evidence to show that I committed this crime. And that's what I challenged them to do. And so, maybe they was doing that also. And then they kept coming back. Light skin, dark skin. Light skin, dark skin. You can't get around that. You can't get around my dark skin, And the fact that I'm not 5'5" or 5'6" inches tall, I'm not 7 feet, but, I'm over 5'5" and 5'6", I'm about 5'9", 5'10". So, it's just, they couldn't refute that. And then the fact that these were snitch witnesses. And I think this is what really was not only, one of the key pieces of evidence is that they had these snitch witnesses, jailhouse snitches that was just so unreliable. And the linchpin to my freedom is that there was a lady who was the gas station attendant the night the crime was committed. She was also one of the three ladies who had said they got, about the identification. But she came to my trial in 1985, and she told the police the day of trial, you've got the wrong man. He's too dark. They hid that. Never let her testify to that. That's the exculpatory evidence you're talking about.
Right. And so one of the reasons you got out was it was a Brady violation.
Yeah,
Is
Brady
that right?
violation.
Yeah.
That's right. And that was Brady material. That's correct. Exculpatory evidence, that was Brady violation. It seemed like you've done some legal research. You understand the law. I don't know if you went to law school or not.
No.
But,
So Fredrico's legal team, just as a sidebar, they had alleged a Brady violation in his case about 10 years ago when they filed a petition for habeas corpus. Based on, it was a couple lines of a medical report, like a hospital record that this woman got as part of the evaluation after this rape.
Right.
And it was these couple lines. It was never brought up at trial. Apparently, there wasn't a clear copy of this record or this corner of this paper whenever it was copied, however that came about, and it wasn't used in the DNA proceedings 15 years later. And essentially, I mean, it got written off, but it was admitted into evidence, but this portion never came about, and it cast doubt on the victim's testimony about whose DNA it might have been that was on this woman from the rape kit, because it never the DNA is not Fredrico's. At one point, a judge had said that she believed that you were innocent of this crime, but that there was no legal pathway for you to get exonerated. Is that right?
Yes, that was very painful. That was and I like to think I'm a fairly strong individual mentally, man, but that one set me so low until it took everything in my being to hold on to life, because that judge, to say something like that, to see that I'm innocent, and to say, let me paraphrase, it said, we believe that the evidence that's been unearthed in this case of Darryl Burton shakes the limbs of the prosecution case. With no small degree of reluctance, we deny Darryl Burton's writ, even though the facts suggest that he may very well be innocent. We believe Missouri convicted an innocent man. In another paragraph, it goes on to say, through the judicial or the executive branch, we hope the state of Missouri take a second look at this case. Man, I'm telling you, I just didn't want to go on after that. I'm like, why would you all not take the first look? You see it. You said it. It's a short opinion, about 15 pages. And I'm like, man, this is unreal. This is unreal to say something like that and let me still languish in prison. I mean, the system, man, had me so angry at the system. I hated this system. I hated the criminal justice system or the legal system, whatever you want to call it. For many years, I totally, man, hated all lawyers, judges, police, prosecutors, defense attorneys, anywhere in the world, for what a handful of people did to me. And I knew it wasn't right, but I mean, that was one on top of the fact that they had this conversation where this guy shot this man 3 different times and they hid that. I didn't even know about the lady that she had told him they had the wrong man. I didn't know anything about that. But just all these things, when you add them together, man, I'm like, man, what kind of system is this? Yeah, so yeah, that judge or judges, they said, we believe Missouri convicted an innocent man with no small degree of reluctance. We deny Darryl Burton's writ, even though facts suggest this man may very well be innocent. And when you got a system that says things like that, that's the only opinion in the United States, if not around the world, that's written like that I'm aware of. In fact, lawyers put my opinion, they wrote books about that opinion, and they said, man, if they did that in this case, this opinion is going to give permission to prosecutors around the country to execute potentially innocent people. That's what they said. They said that opinion, because they're going to use that opinion. And they did. Some prosecutors in other states with the death penalty, they would use that opinion, and that also made me feel bad. I'm like, man, they're going to use an opinion about what a judge or a court said to deny me, freestanding claim of actual innocence or whatever the legal terms that they want to use. And they're going to justify saying, hey, if this guy didn't get relief and the courts said that they believe he is an innocent man, then these other guys, they really don't have a chance. They don't have a snowball's chance in, that other place. And so that was a concern to me also. I said, they're going to use his opinion, man, to execute some people. Some may not be guilty.
And so the legality of it was, what was the exact reason that they're saying you were innocent, but that you couldn't successfully get out on a habeas petition? What was the...
Let me give you the backstory.
Okay.
Let me give you the backstory. Good questions. Very good question. Insightful question. Yeah, you're a smart guy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. You go deep. That's good. But here's the backstory. In 1995 or 96, I can't remember exact dates on this here, but there was a bombing that happened in Oklahoma City. It was called the Mural Building, the Federal Mural Building. And this guy by the name of Timothy McVeigh was arrested, him and Terry Nichols. They were arrested for this bombing, this crime, okay? Timothy McVeigh was sentenced to death for this, sir. So in the process, they began to talk about this Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act, which would put a statute in place by the federal government to make it illegal to bomb any federal building or any building, and you could be punished by death. It's a capital crime. Well, in the process of creating that statute and that law, they had this little thing called the habeas corpus that they amended, and they attached that to that law, signed into law in 1996 by a president named Bill Jefferson Clinton. He signed that bill. That bill gave state prisoners 1 year from the conclusion of exhaustion of all their state court remedies to file their federal habeas corpus. And if they didn't file it within 1 year, then it was waived. So in 1997, I filed my petition for habeas corpus. And this is what the court said to answer your question. They said in that opinion, not only that they believe Missouri convicted an innocent man, but they said due to impediments erected by courts and by Congress, this court cannot go into the merits of the claims of Darryl Burton's innocence. That's what they used. They used that law to deny me habeas corpus relief. That's why.
So they said they legally couldn't entertain your claims of actual innocence that they, in fact, agreed with because you didn't timely file this habeas corpus petition.
It wasn't the timeliness of filing the habeas petition. It was the fact that the limitations, it was restricted from being reviewed in a federal court since it was a state court action.
Oh, okay, I got you.
As a state court action, and the federal court was basically without jurisdiction. That's what they were saying. It's not in our jurisdiction because the laws have changed. It used to be a time when the federal courts could entertain state prisoners' habeas corpus petitions. But since they changed that law that was signed in the law by Bill Clinton, they said now we don't have jurisdiction. We can't even go into the merits. It has to be such a high bar. It is such a high bar and threshold that I would have had to overcome to get them to take a look at my case. For instance, had I been facing the death penalty with that type of sketchy evidence, then maybe they would have considered it or reconsidered it. But since that law was passed, they said that take the federal court out of contention. We can't review it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the limitations in Fredrico's case. I mean, they filed a habeas petition in state court in St. Francis County where he's in prison still. But I mean, he has no legal pathway to file a federal one. And so now, I mean, I think his only legal remedy, it appears, is this circuit attorney's office review. I mean, it's his last shot.
Exactly, and I think that's because I think they use what's called the conviction integrity unit. I think to see if they can. There's a new law that I want to say came into effect. I can't remember the year.
21.
Yeah, that he may come within the parameters of that law. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, that may be his only opportunity, because he can't go back into federal court. If he's filed in federal court already, and maybe he's filed a state habeas corpus. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, it is a long shot, but that's the shot he's got. He got to take it, because that'll be the one to free him.
The fact that Centurion decided to take on Fredrico's case, when we were talking earlier, you kind of mentioned, that they'll do a lot of research before they take on the case. What does that tell you? I mean, since you're an advocate for him as being somebody else whose case was taken on by them, and but what does that tell you, that they decided to take on his case, and they've been with it for 20 years now and are still trying to exonerate this man?
That's the dedication of Centurion and Miracle of Innocence, which is an organization. We model our organization after Centurion. And then what they said to me, and I know the same thing they said to Fredrico: when we take your case, we're going to stay on your case till we won. Prove that you're innocent, or God forbid, you should die in prison, natural causes, or whatever case may be. But they stick with you until they get you set free. And that's their motto, unless the courts just finally just say there's no other avenue for you, or no other venue to get your case heard in front of a judge. But that's what they do. They stick with you. And so, I mean, they took my case, and I mean, I'm blessed and I'm grateful that they were able to get me out. And I'm praying and hoping that Fredrico can receive some of the same benefits and results at some point. But that's what Centurion does. That's what Miracle of Innocence, that's what we do. Because there's no amount of time or money or resources that you can allocate towards someone who's innocent. I mean, you just think, you have family member, people you love, and your loved one is in prison for something they didn't do. You move heaven and earth to get them out, and you should. Mm-hmm. I mean, some folks will move heaven and earth if their child committed the crime. I mean, I know parents who go visit their children who's on death row, and they're not innocent. But they, and particularly the moms, they stick with their sons or their daughters, and you should. I mean, sometimes, even some most heinous acts that are committed, it's done sometime out of a heat of passion or alcohol or drugs. It's not like the sum total of this person's whole existence. That was a moment in time, and it was a bad moment. It may have created victims, unfortunately, but that person is still a human being. That person still has value. That person still has some redemptive qualities somewhere. But to write that person off and say, well, your life is going to be extinguished and you're going to receive the death penalty because we believe that you're just so horrible. You no longer belong as a part of humanity on the earth, on the planet. I mean, one person can make that decision, has that kind of power. I don't agree with that, prescription. One person can say who live or die. One prosecutor. That to me is in itself, that's just, that's a bad practice. Worst case practice. You hear about, what they call evidence-based best practices. Well, that's the worst practice in my opinion.
And if you could say anything to the circuit attorney's office, who kind of has this in their hands now, has the ability to really reopen this case and look at it again, even after 37 years, what would you say to them? What kind of advice would you give to them?
I would say to the prosecutors, and I've talked to prosecutors, let me tell you a story. I got a lot of stories, man. A lot of them matter. I could sit and talk to you for hours about stories that have been my life experience, both before prison, during prison, after prison. I gave a presentation, like I said, I give talks all over the country and other countries. I mean, I give them presentations, in Canada, in Europe, and in Israel, and in Jordan, in Tel Aviv, and Old Jerusalem, as well as in Haiti and other places, right? And I'd say to these prosecutors, there was a lady who came to me when I was in South Dakota, and I gave a presentation, and she was crying uncontrollably, and she was a lawyer. And she was crying just uncontrollably, and she came and she hugged me, and tears just rolling, streaming down her face. I said, man, what's wrong? It's going to be all right. I'm out now. She said, no, Darryl, you don't understand. You don't understand. I said, what is it that I don't understand? She said, when I was a young prosecutor many years ago, more than 3 decades ago, we had evidence of a man's innocence. We knew he was innocent, and yet our state still executed that man, and we didn't turn that information over to the defense. We didn't give it to him. I was a young prosecutor. That haunts me because that could have been you. And that's what I say to prosecutors. Sometimes you have information that's not turned over, that has not been revealed, and you either hold people in prison for the rest of their lives, their natural lives, or people get executed wrongfully. They did it to a guy named Jesus Christ. He was an innocent man. If you don't know the story, I'm happy to tell you about it. But Pilate and a few other people said he's innocent at least 8 times in this book called the Bible. They said it 8 times he was innocent, and they still killed him. So somebody like Fredrico Lowe, who's been there for 37 years, don't you know there are people who've committed crimes of murder, sometimes double murder, and they grant them parole after 25 or 30 years. They're out. Fredrico, that was a victim. No one died. No one is dead because of this alleged charge against Fredrico Lowe, who I believe they got it wrong again. They got it wrong.
And you touched on something there so after he got convicted, the judge sentenced him to 35 years on both the rape and the sodomy, and then 15 on the tampering with the witness, and put him consecutively. So he got an 85-year prison sentence for this. They sentenced him as a prior and persistent offender, I think is what they call it.
You say he's got 85 years?
85 years.
He got 35 for what?
35 for rape, 35 for sodomy, and 15 for tampering with a witness.
Wow.
And so 80, and they're all stacked on top. Yeah. So 85 years. Wow. So he got a life sentence. I mean, he was 26. Exactly. He was my age when he got sentenced.
Wow.
So, that's another thing. I'll have these long conversations with people about it, and at the end they'll say, and he's been,
it's been almost 40 years.
I mean, let's say for the sake of argument that he did do it. He's been in prison for 37 years.
Right. So is there that's when I was talking about the redemption, the redeeming qualities, Now, he's probably never going to say, man, I'm showing remorse. You don't show remorse for something you didn't do. I was never going to say I'm sorry to the victim's family of a crime I didn't commit. I'm sorry they lost a loved one, but I can't stand up and say, man, I'm sorry because, I didn't commit this crime against your loved one. I can't say I'm sorry for something that I did because I didn't do it. So that's the same with Fredrico Lowe. He can't say he's sorry for something he didn't do. He's sorry that the person went through that. But, after all those years, at some point, even if he was someone who had committed the crime, he would have made parole by now, I believe. I mean, he's pretty much a model prisoner, and so he would have been considered for parole, if he's not already considered for parole, probably 10, 15 years ago.
One thing that is kind of a balancing act in this is that before he got charged and convicted of this rape, he had, I think, 4 felonies on his record or something like that. Yeah. He was selling drugs. He and his friends were stealing cars, and I've talked to him about it. I mean, he's kind of just told me, this is what we were doing, right. And so the fact that he was a person with more than a few felonies on his record, right. And then he gets charged and convicted of this. It wasn't like a guy who had a super clean record his whole life and can say, I never did anything, and then I got framed for this, and now I'm in prison for life.
Yes.
He did have I guess he wasn't winning any Boy Scouts awards
he
for
had a checkered pass.
Right, and that's kind of something that I feel like is,
yeah.
I don't know what your past was before you got convicted of this murder, but I don't know how people listening, because I can't just leave that out. I have to lay out all the facts,
absolutely,
and all the history of it as best as I can, because if not, I wouldn't be servicing the truth as best I can. But I think some people might hear that after explaining and go, yeah, he probably did it.
Yeah, right. And and I think people like to justify their behavior when they convict an innocent person, or they convict any person that they think or they may have doubts about his guilt. They say, oh, he probably did it, and he probably did something else. I guess so they can say they can sleep better at night.
Or maybe say,
You know.
well, if he wasn't that guy, he was probably one of the other two guys or something like that
Yeah,
that attacked her. Some kind of
connection. They want to try to
Yeah.
make some kind of link to this crime with him. Which to me, it's like I said, it flies in the face of not only just reality, but also it just insults the intelligence of people, because now you're saying, oh, he probably did that. Well, what about you? You probably did something too, right? That maybe you didn't get charged for, or maybe you should be charged for that. You can say that about every person walking the planet, just about. But here it is. Did he do this? Yes, he may have other convictions, and I've had convictions. I had one conviction for burglary. I committed that crime. I did time for that crime, and I admitted it in the court of law. I accepted my responsibility. And I sold drugs too. Not so much as every young person in the community sell drugs, but yes, some of us do. We claim that I was a new dad. I just had a child. My best friend on the West Coast, he was a drug dealer, big time. I went up there to try to get me some drugs. Not to make excuses, but that's what sometimes you do when you want to try to take care of your family. And not to make it right. It's definitely wrong. But now, when I wanted to sell drugs, it was illegal. Now I don't want to sell drugs. I can go and open up me a dispensary and sell weed if I want to right now as we speak. So you know how things change in life. Life is funny like that. But here it is that with this guy, Fredrico Lowe, I mean, come on, man. Yes, he may have had some charges in the past, and he may have done time, and served time for that. But that don't make him guilty of this. And this is the thing about people who may have power and make decisions. They can say, well, this guy here, he's been a bad guy, and done this and done that. Well, we want him off the streets anyway. So if he didn't do this here, oh well, who's going to care? Nobody's going to care. Well, if it's somebody who you love and care about, you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. Young people make mistakes all the time. They make bad decisions all the time. You're 19, 20, 21 years old. Man, you're still developing, I mean, young guys, and especially in a gang-infested, drug-infested, violent community, you're trying to find your way around things and you're trying to survive. You're not going to make some of the best choices. If you didn't have a dad in the home or good positive role model, male figure, yeah, not to make excuses. I mean, I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to put some, at least give some context to some of these things and decisions that young people make, in our community. And not all of them make those decisions, those bad choices, those bad decisions. But I can tell you right now, that's not the whole person. I bet you he made some good decisions too. I bet you, he has a lot of other things that's positive about him that never get reported. Can they talk about that too? Well, probably not, because it don't sell enough papers.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I don't know. Have you ever actually spoken to him?
Yeah, he called me not long ago.
Oh, really? You guys talk? So you guys just talk about?
Yeah, we talk.
What do you?
Yeah.
What do you guys talk about whenever he calls?
We talk about getting him out, man. We talk about getting him out. Yeah, and then we talk about other things too. I mean, basically family, friends, and of course talk about some of the guys that's in that place or been in that place, or maybe guys who've passed away. He's been there for a long time. There's so many guys that's no longer alive who, when I went in, we went in as kids. I was 22 when I went in. And so we was pretty much the same age. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we talk about, just things that we reminisce, about, when we was in there maybe playing handball or basketball and different things like that, or, who may have been, in leadership in the prison, and, how some of the programs now that they provide, self-help programs, they didn't have them when we got there. And, we talk about little things like that, and ways to get out and help the community. We want to get out and help the youth. It's like young people like you that, we want to get out and start talking to. And that's what he's, been saying, man. When I get out, man, I want to go talk to the youth, young people, college age, young juveniles. We want to get out and talk to them and just let them know, man, as young people, because you can make a wrong decision. It can just be one time. It could be a couple of times, and it could cost you the rest of your life. And that's what we want to talk, to the young people, to the youth, man. And because, man, no kid, if we believe, that get into a situation that, is just, you just write them off and say, tough, man, you're no good anymore. Mm-hmm. No, man, I'm talking about, just like a barrel of apples. You may have one bad apple, man, but that don't make the whole barrel rotten, He won out, man. He won out. So, I mean, his conversation with you would be different probably than conversation with me.
Right, yeah, definitely.
Because we have some lived experiences about that place. I was there, and so certain people, who I may ask about, certain people he may ask about, and of course we talk about Centurion Ministries because we got some similar experiences. But when he's talking to you, it's probably all business because he's like, man, come on, Matt, let's get me out of here, man. We can have a small talk when I get out. We can go, we can go to TGI Fridays or go to to a Panera Bread and sit down, man, and kick it and enjoy. But right now, man, I'm 37 years in. I got to stay focused. I don't want to lose. Every minute counts, and that's what he's thinking. When he have you on the phone, he's thinking tick, 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 tick. Every minute count, Matt. We trying to get me out.
The fact that it's been 37 years and he hasn't wavered on his claims of innocence, like, I think there's also maybe some people out there that think, everybody who goes to prison claims they're innocent or says they're innocent.
Yeah, right, and that's another what you call a misnomer. That's some misdirected information, as they say, fake news. Right? Everybody claim that when they get arrested, I'm innocent. But once they get to prison, prisoners don't want to hear that. If you ever saw the movie Shawshank Redemption, and the guy came in, claiming to be innocent, and they laughed at him, pretty much. They just kind of, ribbed him about it. Oh, yeah, you're innocent. Right. In prison, that's what it's like. Man, if you're innocent, they basically say, prove it. And no one talk about being innocent in prison for the most part. Guys say, look, I did it. It just didn't happen the way they said it happened, or I got too much time for what the crime I committed. Very few guys even talk about being innocent. Very few. Because you're not talking to people you can trust. You don't want to talk around prisoners who, some of them may be snitches or snitch witnesses, or end up going to court and saying, hey, man, that guy was talking to me about his case, and make it worse for you. So you just go to the law library, and if you're innocent, you just work on your case. You keep your head focused and work with guys who are working on their cases like that. But no, you don't, you don't so much as go to prison and then become all of a sudden, hey, man, I'm this good guy. I'm this, innocent guy. No, you got to prove it, man. And that's what prisoners going to tell you.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you think I missed or that you wanted to add? That was a really insightful conversation. I'm glad we could meet.
No, absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. I want to say that Miracle of Innocence, if anybody is interested, and I don't know if you're going to keep this part of your, if it come out of the edit, if you chop it up or take it out, but miracleofinnocence.org is an organization we formed, me and Lamont McIntyre, I should say, and some others, to help free innocent people and help them when they come home. Because when I came home, Matt, I asked these reentry programs for some help. I said, I need some help. I did 25 years. They said, we can't help you. We only help guilty people. We don't help innocent people. I said, but man, I did all this time. I need help.
Right. You still went to prison for 24 years.
Yeah. They said, well, you guys need to start an innocent organization to help innocent people, is what I was told. So we did. Me and Lamont McIntyre started Miracle of Innocence, and we help people get out of prison, and then we help them when they come home with housing assistance, transportation, communication, food, clothing, some counseling. We provide, some resources so they can get counseling if they want it, mentorship, because it wasn't there for me. I was homeless. I couldn't find a job for 2 years. It was a struggle, and it's another thing that we lose. I lost a relationship with my daughter. She was ended up in foster care. We were both in institutions at the same time. I left her when she was 7 months. I came home to a 26-year-old young lady. She was your age the next time I saw her. She don't have anything to do with me now. And said, Dad, I just, it's not your fault. I know that, but I've learned to live without you or my mom in my life, and that's kind of how I want to keep it. That breaks my heart, because I'm her father. I'm her biological father. She don't want to have anything to do with me. I don't know your relationship with your father or your mother, but you want to be in their life, right? Mm-hmm. She don't want to be in my life. And I'm like, baby, I'm sorry. I would have never walked out of your life. I mean, I held you in my arms 3 times when you was just a baby. I wanted to be your dad. I was about to go even do crimes to sell drugs to try to take care of you. I had just enrolled in college, but she said, yeah, Dad, but I'm sorry. I just want to live my life, on my own. And that breaks my heart. That hurts. That's the biggest regret that I have. And so this is what I would like people to know. When you frame an innocent person, you're not just sentencing that person, but you sentence that person's children or the family. One sentence creates multiple prisons, and we know that, and the victims, they don't get closure. They don't get anything that, that's conclusive for them. Somebody killed their loved one and they arrested the wrong person, and so miracleofinnocence.org, or you can go to my story, personal story, and, you can get a copy of my book, darrylburton.org. I have a book that's published called Innocent, A Second Look, and it tells a whole lot about my journey and my story. I was helped, and I feel like I'm obligated, and I have a duty to help others. And it was a Jewish young lady who told me that. Her name is Mindy Corcoran, and she said, Darryl, you was helped. You need to start an organization to help others. I said, Mindy, I don't know how to do that. All I know how to do is time. I never started a foundation, a nonprofit. How do you do that? She said, people would help you. You just get it started. You've been helped. Now you help others. Pay it forward. And I followed her advice. And she had lost her dad and her son due to a killing. A guy killed them at the Jewish Center, thought they were Jewish, and it was a hate crime. You may have heard of this story a few years ago. And they were not even Jewish. They just happened to be at the Jewish Center. And we have our gala this year at a Jewish synagogue. But we all one, man. We just all one people, And another thing about I wanted to say, but when you say about Fredrico having kind of checkered past, and some of us may have had a checkered past, I go back to this guy named Jesus. If you know some of his followers, some of the people that he used, these were so-called some of the, roughnecks in the community. They was not some of the, what you call, people from the best, communities or had the best, history and records. Some of them were tax collectors back then. That was considered, not good. Some of them were sinful people, and some of them prostitutes. These were some of his followers. These were some of the people he worked with. He worked with people just like, I've identified them like people like Fredrico Lowe-Bey. One of them even said, get away from me, Jesus. I'm a sinful man. His name was Peter. He said, yeah, I'm going to build my church. You're going to be called, Cephas or Simon, my rock. So Jesus, he worked with people who were not from the so-called upper class or, the people from the best of society. He worked with somebody called them the nobodies. So Fredrico may be considered as one of the nobodies. But to somebody, that's all everybody needs, just to be known as I am somebody.
Burden of Proof, One Man's Fight to Show He's Innocent, is a First Alert 4 original podcast. It's produced and voiced by me, Matt Woods.